So I'm interested in how running or being an athlete, right? I don't think either of us are really athletes, right? We work out, we do physical things, but we're not athletes. And so I'm interested in how that world of working out and being an athlete has relayed into business for you. And when did you kind of start making that plot?
Yeah, that's a couple of things really. For me, first and foremost, it's about discipline. Do you have the ability to generate some sort of plan, and then are you able to stick to that plan, execute that plan, and see it through to completion? That's really how it is for me. And then I guess when I first started to make that connection between the two, like you, I have many people that ask me if I would help them with their business, and whether if it was running incubators or with Start Peninsula, whatever the case is, a lot of people approach me and ask me to help them start their business. So I would ask them, one, what's the biggest thing that you've ever accomplished? And then I listen. The other part though is like, hey, have you ever done a 5K? Have you ever done, some sort of running race? And I'm just curious, what their answer to that is. So many folks be like, oh, I could never do it. And it's just like, well, that's like red flag number one, right? But then
Does it say the word can't?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. Or like whenever I have a conversation, be like, oh yeah, I ran, or I'm in training for a marathon, or I just ran, whatever. And people are like, oh man, I could never do that. It's just like, well, I'll store that in the back of my head. In terms of, do you have what it takes to grind through and see something through to the finish? So yeah, those are the big things for me, man. And more and more, it continues to hold true all the time.
I remember one time you told me something like, oh yeah, most people when they are starting in their fitness journey of like running or other things, they don't start with Ironmans or marathons. They start with like the lower stuff. And I did the complete opposite. And then I was trying to do like the lower end stuff. And so that was an interesting.
Well, the thing is, man, yeah, I mean, with that, it's just, it's one of those deals. You gotta finish that first workout and want more. You can't do your first workout and then you're so sore you can't even get out of bed or get up off the chair the next day. That you're never going to go back out again. But
yeah, actually, someone started working out recently and they asked me for like some advice or something else. Like, whatever you think you're going to do a quarter of it. Yeah. Just so that they make sure that they go back the next day. Right. Because if they like, even in business, like if you go, like we're so like gung ho on like, we're so aggressively passionate at that moment. But I don't think you've really, I don't know what that's called, but like, I don't think that's discipline at that point. You haven't instilled that in your mind. You haven't figured that aspect out. You're just really excited about insert whatever that thing is. And so if you have to build up, I don't know, a callus of that aspect of it. And so I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. One of the cool things is that we commented before we hit record on this is that we've had several professional athletes on the show, and and we're joined by another one today. So it was almost a year ago that that we had Scratch on
Alan Lim.
Yeah, and that was a great episode. That was like, talk about blowing me away in like the first 5 minutes. But I'd be curious.
Dude created, I don't know how big of a business, basically out of a paint shop, which has nothing to do with his business, by the way, which is completely ridiculous.
Yeah. How about you, Greg? What's your take? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. No, it's a pleasure to be here, Tim, Zach. Love the show. I just saw you guys hit 100 episodes, which I think is pretty impressive from that standpoint. But, I think we're all mental athletes at the end of the day. Whether we bring it into business, we bring it into life. I saw that a lot as a baseball player. The folks that focused on the mental side of the game, a lot of times those were the individuals that were able to persevere to that next level. Your body can only take so much and your mind has to take over at some point. So I think it becomes fascinating from that standpoint. Tim, you mentioned it, people come to you as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, ask you questions to help them get to the next level. And I think that that makes you a mentally fit, and you've had failures in your life that you've learned from, and you convey those to folks who are potentially going through it or going to go through it. And it makes them, much better off at the end of the day. And that's something I always valued as an athlete. And I try to bring that into the business world today, leading a team over here at Valor Cybersecurity, and be able to take lessons from other folks out in the community, like yourselves, and, intertwine it into our business to make us a little bit better off, and, mentally, physically, all the above. So looking forward to diving in here. Thanks for the opportunity to be on.
This is almost episode one. I don't even know. Episode
140.
140.
Oh, really? Okay.
140 something. Who knows? But I swear, we should go back and look at this on episode 1, 3. And now I lost my train of thought, so it doesn't even matter. But you go.
While you're trying to recapture that, Greg, what position did you play? Did you play in baseball?
Yeah, so growing up, I was a pitcher, and then I played first and third base, which is what we call the hot corner. Most of the time, those are the people that protect the pitcher. So I wanted to protect the pitcher when I was not pitching, because you only pitch about one day a week. But as I elevated through the different levels at Old Dominion and then played in the minor leagues for a couple of years, they stuck me just on the pitcher's mound and said, "This is what you're going to be good at." And I think one of the lessons I took away from that was you can't spread yourself too thin to try to be good at everything. You got to kind of know your strengths from that standpoint. And I always try to use that lesson as a way to, improve my game as a pitcher. Obviously, leading a company now, I try to make sure that the folks on my team are self-aware, self-conscious of what they're good at, what I'm good at, and how we can kind of meet in the middle to build the best company possible from that standpoint. So I always like to say it's kind of the loneliest place on the baseball field, because you're holding a ball and everybody in the stands and on the field are waiting for you to throw it. So it's kind of, they're all staring at you, waiting for you to do something. When you're not doing something, they get bored potentially, which that's why a lot of people don't like baseball, because it's kind of a slower game.
Well, to Zach's point, in terms of how did you develop your mental toughness? You don't have the right stuff. You're just not on your A game. Maybe you just walked a batter. Where do you get that mental toughness from? Is it just callousing, your brain and believing in yourself, or walk us through that?
Yeah, I think it all started. It all starts kind of in our childhood. So both my parents were Navy. It was a very kind of, not necessarily strict, but, you had your principles, and you were, die hard on those principles, and, loyal, as loyal as you could be. I think it's definitely a little bit of callous. But, early on, I had an older brother that played baseball as well. So early on, I recognized that, every day your body is a little bit different, based on how you sleep. Maybe your head's twisted one way and you're, laying the other way. If you don't sleep exactly the same every night, your body's going to feel a little bit different. So your mind has to kind of be able to know, where you're tight, where you're loose, to kind of adapt to be able to throw a baseball to a, small kind of centimeter target. So, just kind of being self-aware, knowing what you're good at. And then when you're in the moment, you have to be able to work through and make rapid adjustments in real time. And I think that's something that's relevant for all of our businesses at the end of the day is, we all set out on this big goal, big dream to build a great business. And it's never perfect. I haven't met anybody that, built a business and it went exactly how they plotted it out to be from that standpoint. So I think it's a little bit of, trial by fire, adjusting in the moment. Absolutely. And then, being able to have folks around you who can say, you're doing this right, you're doing that wrong. A lot of times I think in leadership specifically, and this is relevant in athletics, is a lot of times we're the one that doesn't see the wrong thing that we're doing, and other people may be able to see it quicker than we can realize it. So I think leaning on teammates, leaning on people in the community, I think helps us all at the end of the day.
From sticking with the sports aspect of it, we'll get into the legit business stuff at some point. But I
love it.
think No, not I think. I know for a fact that, because I think you guys will all agree with this, there's just so many parallels between business and fitness, business and sports and things like that. It's instilled in you. In business, we talk a lot about the word failure. I hate the word failure because you're really probably not hitting rock bottom, which to me is what failure means. But as a pitcher, or as a kid growing up, or trying to make it to a baseball team or any sporting aspect, for when it doesn't go good, how do you recover from that? What do you do to do that? Because that exact same thing is going to happen on the business side of it now at Valor, right? Maybe it happened this morning, and then the positive thing is you get on this call with us, and then after that you have another positive, then hopefully no other negatives. But when the negative things hit, how do you get through them? Is there anything from a sports perspective that you look back on that was instilled in you? Kind of run me through that.
Yeah, so I was always told from a young age, and I had people tell me multiple times, you're not going to make it, you're going to get hurt, kind of the people that doubt you. I think that's a driving force. I always looked at it as, if you're not failing, then you're not trying hard enough, and you're not pushing yourself hard enough to get better. So that was always one of the things that drove me when I would fail, is if I don't take a lesson from this, then I basically went through that experience for no reason. So I think that's one of the forcing functions for me, is I knew that when I was failing, I was actually growing to some extent, or becoming a better player. I also think it's a little bit of, they call it like athlete insanity, which, we can bring into the business world, but you kind of have to be in the business world. You have to have a kind of a short memory, but be able to, look long-term and recognize those lessons to be able to use them from that standpoint. So I think it's a little bit of having the hard nose. I know the mission I'm on. I know where I'm trying to get. This failure is just a step in that process, and not let it bring me down, but actually elevate kind of where we're at. And from the business side, I mean, we fail every day, right? People tell us no, 7, 8, 9 times out of 10. I think in baseball, it was, if you got to hit 3 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. That's what they kept. That's what they always told us. So when I would pitch, if I had a good outing, 1 out of every 2 or 3 times, that was kind of like a pat on the back for a lot of people. But obviously internally, you're like, why'd I have those 2 bad outings? This sucks. This is terrible. I'm not a good player. And if you get in that hurricane of thought, it brings you down and doesn't allow you to actually learn from the lessons. So that's just a couple of things I've noticed, both on the baseball and the business side.
Yeah, that's always I would love to get into the mind of of a relief pitcher. I mean, of all pitchers, man. I mean, it's just like you're either hero or zero, and talk about having a short memory. I mean, you blow a save, man, and you got to potentially get back out there the very next day, and all eyes are on you, and you got to perform.
Who's the trumpet guy for the Mets? We need that as our insurance song. Let's get Timmy Trumpets or something. Let's go. Let's get that going.
Yeah, the closer. Yeah. I think all that music, all that stuff helps, though. It helps kind of, when you're getting into that situation, you're going into a presentation, it kind of, snaps you into the, live in the moment, be where your feet are, all those kind of good things that you need when you're performing. If you're thinking about the past, or you're too far into how you're going to improve after the fact, it makes it so that performance, you're not bringing your full self to it. And relief pitchers have to have a short fuse, because a lot of times when you fail, the coach throws you out there the next day to try to kind of wipe the slate clean. And I try to bring that to my team at Valor, when we have bad days and, things are on fire, and, kind of trying to hit the reset button in some way, whether that's, going for a walk, or, finding ways to kind of take the lessons, but then kind of forget about the failure so you can push forward from that standpoint.
One of the things that you brought up was insanity or whatever. And that's one thing that's really interesting about founders. Yeah, it was like founders, there needs to be a little bit of insanity, not too much. And it's like, there's like that super fine line of how crazy can a founder be? They got to be crazy enough to know that they can change the world, but they can't be so crazy. They're like, they have to be able to manage the situation and not run something into the ground. It's just, I think it's really funny when people will behind the scenes, like if it's an investor briefing or you hear a pitch where you're like, I don't know, man, that dude's crazy. And it's like, well, that's not all bad.
Might just be crazy enough, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're living in the world of, I know we've talked about it, it's changed, but it hasn't really. Like growing up, we were told, this is the life that you live. You go work for a man. It works this way. Now, maybe there's this option where you do it yourself. I still think we're very much in the go. Because I mean, you talked about doubters, Greg. I can think about teachers telling you you're not going to be an athlete. You're not going to make it. So this is why you have to do that. We're still going to continue to be like that. They don't tell you to really be an entrepreneur. Heck, I mean, I remember, you got ODU right behind you. You're an ODU alum and all that. I was on one of the first Strom visits at Babson College, and I remember I was talking to, I don't remember who it was. It was one of the top 4 or 5 people there, and I was like, so what are you guys planning on doing when your students are doing so well in their business that you've told them to do when they're sophomores, and they leave the school to pursue that business? And their response was something along the lines of, well, we're hoping that doesn't happen. And it's like, yeah, but that's what you say you want these people to do. So are you really setting them up for that? And I get what they're saying. Obviously, they want them to graduate so they can be proud alumni and yada, yada, yada. But it's kind of like, if things are going well, are you going to keep doing that and going to school? Or are you going to put all your eggs into that basket of the business? And so it's kind of interesting. So what is is there anything about ODU that, I mean, because I feel like Valor kind of came out of ODU. Like, what's the inspiration of how ODU helped you, the whole Valor story? Give us the elevator.
So I actually, freshman year, I almost failed out of ODU. I was there to play baseball. I was terrible at school, or I wasn't focused enough on it. And I ended up actually going away for a year to a school in Florida to try to get drafted, because I was doing really well on the baseball field, but I knew that I wasn't good at school. That was kind of one of the things that was, bringing me down mentally, because I just wasn't doing good. And I felt like I didn't have the time, and I didn't have the balance at all. So I went away for a year, had a coach at this school in Florida that was kind of brought me back to my roots. He was kind of like a military general. He basically said, school's number one. You need to, wear a collared shirt to school. And if you don't do what you need to do in the classroom, you're not going to play on the field. So it kind of put things into perspective a little bit. So I went back to ODU. The coach brought me back in. That was a huge step in my journey to where I got today. The entrepreneurship school was a big reason why I decided to come back. It was ramping up at that time. Mark Strom and his family donated some money, and they wanted to build kind of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. From a young age, I always tried to create value for people, whether it was helping people in my neighborhood for an exchange of dollars to be able to go get a snack or go to a movie. Just trying to find ways to benefit the community and find ways to kind of create a win-win there. So kind of absorb what was going on in that environment. Put my first business, which was called Helpers for Hire, was basically taking that neighborhood concept and recruiting high schoolers to kind of help in their neighborhoods, give them some resources to be able to do it. And what I saw was that a lot of the students in the entrepreneurial center, those initial kind of core set of businesses, couldn't afford websites and apps from the small businesses in the area. It was expensive. It was 10 to 20 grand. I don't know any college student that can afford that, while they're dumping into tuition and things of that nature, while their business ramped up. So I said, how can I take this Helpers for Hire concept and kind of think about how I can help folks on this campus in the community, kind of enable them to be able to develop the technology they needed for their business concept. Everybody needs a website or an app nowadays to be able to put themselves out there and their best foot forward. So I went to the computer science school over at ODU. A lot of the folks were extremely technical. They didn't really want to talk about business, but they loved developing things, writing code and developing user interfaces, things of that nature. So I got a core set of like 5 folks at the beginning. We ended up scaling to, I think, 10 from ODU, and then a couple of folks who were graduated to be able to serve these students. And we ended up serving folks outside of the school as well. But I had a lot of great mentors. Jim Lant was one of those who kind of just was very honest with me when it came to business and kind of instilled some core principles in me, which I still use today. Nancy Gurdon, folks like that were instrumental in my growth journey as somebody who went from baseball player, put in a box of, you're a baseball player, you're a jock, and that's all you do well. I proved them right when I was a freshman. But when I came back as a junior and senior, I had a different perspective and was kind of, clawing my way back to be, someone who was more personal growth oriented. And I knew that education was a big piece of that to get me where I wanted to be. I think I ended up, as a senior, bringing my GPA from what it was like a 2.0, 1.9 when I left as a freshman. I think I brought it back up to like a low 3. Which was big for me at the time because I went from what I looked at as failure to somebody who was, performing in the classroom. And it actually helped elevate my game on the field as well, because I became a better student of the game because I learned what the core principles were in order to learn a lesson or improve my game from that standpoint. So ODU's been huge. I still go back nowadays and all the football games, football team's doing incredible. And the baseball program has shot up. They went from conference, the CAA, Colonial Athletic Association, to Conference USA, and they're continually evolving and moving up. The reason I went to ODU, and I had offers from other schools in Virginia and outside in Florida, but I wanted to play from day one. I didn't want to sit on the bench for 2 years and learn from the older guys and then try to apply it later on in life. I think that's one of the things that set me up for success in the long term, because I was able to actually exercise the muscle of playing, failing, and then learning from those failures to become a better player. Obviously, the educational side was huge, but I think at the end of the day, we are a accumulation of our experiences. And at this point in my life, a couple, three or so decades in, that was a huge stepping stone for me to be able to get to the top of the staircase as I build Valor, build the team, and help as many folks as we can.
What did you major in at ODU?
So I started out as a sports management. So basically every athlete, they're like, you're doing sports management. And so I went to the coach late in my freshman year and said, I'm going to go major in business. Like I've always kind of been fascinated with these business folks, the Steve Jobs and all the books we read. And I'm going to do that. And they basically said, they kind of went silent for a minute, and they were like, I'm looking at your grades right here in sports management. It doesn't look like you're giving much effort, and there's no way you're going to do business. You're not going to have any time. You're going to be studying all the time. You're not going to have any time for the field. We highly recommend you not do that. And I said, this is either going to deter me from doing it, or it's going to give me that much more fuel to actually do it. It ended up being the latter. And I took that into every time I failed a test, it says, I said, somebody told me I couldn't do this. That's going to really help me to do better on the next test, because it kind of gives you that punch in the gut that says, when people doubt you, it gives you a little bit of empowerment. I saw that in my baseball journey. I had coaches say, you're great now, but your pitching motion is going to hurt you. You're not going to make it past high school. So every time I took a step, you're kind of proving them wrong. So I think we all kind of need critics to some extent, good or bad. It could be your best friend that says, comes up to you and says, hey, you say or right way too much. And, those types of honest critics elevate you to the next level, business, baseball, personal. And I think it's important for growth at the end of the day.
Is there a difference between an honest critic and a doubter, though? I feel like doubters are more like haters, and then an honest critic is someone who's actually trying to help you. I don't know. Like as I had written down just about doubters earlier, and then you brought it back up. But like, there are people who are just haters, and it's like, okay, like you need to remove those individuals from a situation. But those individuals who are giving you honest feedback, honest criticism, that I feel like that is different than a doubter. I don't know. Like either of you can respond, but I mean, it's just a weird conundrum.
Yeah, I think it's part of it's all how it's delivered. I mean, I think that's a big.
You an
big
idiot
thing.
to do that. that's a hater.
And it's easy to identify problems, but if they identify, hey, you do this, and then if they follow that up with a solution, then I don't see that as a hater. Then that would be someone critiquing you and giving you a solution. That's just my take. I don't know about you, Craig.
Yeah, I think that's more of the honest, feedback. Is they're able to say, you're doing this, here's something to consider. I think the haters are more on the, I want to tear you down to make myself feel better, or I'm saying this because it's in my benefit and I get a, endorphin rush or, whatever hormone you want to say when you give someone bad advice, and then walk away and say, man, that felt so good to tear that person down. I think that kind of separates the haters versus the honest feedback. Because I never had a coach that said, hey, you're doing terrible today, and then walked away. They always had something productive to say following.
Zach, did you happen to see the tweet that I had just put out recently? It was a Goggins quote, and it was like, "You'll never meet a hater doing better than you." And to me, man, it just was so profound, and it hit just right. I mean, it's just like, and the more I think about it, I'm like, wow. That is so true. True in terms of receiving and delivering. So if I catch myself throwing shade at something, I'm like, why am I throwing shade? So I have to take a step back there as well. But when it comes to receiving that shade, I'm like, it's just easy to then discount them, be like, hey, man, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
Good old David Goggins. What an interesting fella. I mean, that guy can do something like I have a lot of respect for him. And it's, he's done a lot of things that a lot of people have said you could never do. And it's, he has this thing that I don't think a lot of people talk about. Are you familiar with this guy, Greg?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I would assume so. So there's this, he said that he's not David Goggins, he's Goggins now, right? He had to create Goggins, this mythological creature to become the man that he is. There's a sales technique for people who hate doing cold calls or calls in general, where it's like you can do the mirror or not. Like you can have like this little mirror next to your telephone, your screen, or however you're doing the call. But when you're going to do these calls, you become this other creature. You become this other person, so that it's not Zack Miller making these calls. It's Maxzilla who's making these calls, and Maxzilla is an animal, and he's going to take it down. And so it's an interesting. I don't think most people make that connection in the same way, but it's like, okay, like if you doubt yourself so much, maybe make up this other thing and become that other thing, and that's the strongness of it. And it's interesting because what Goggins has done is pretty incredible, even though he's the same person as David Goggins. So
building the brand.
I don't. He doesn't need to build that brand anymore. He's done just fine. Like he's done very well for himself, and so it's exciting to see that.
Yeah. So the reason, Greg, that I was asking what your major is, I was curious how you made that transition into cybersecurity. Can you walk us through that evolution?
Yeah. So I ended up majoring in economics. So I went into the business school, was trying to figure out, did I want to do finance? Did I want to do economics? Everybody said that the finance majors, went into working for banks and, crunching numbers, looking at spreadsheets, things of that nature. I said, I kind of thought at that time, I'm already looking at spreadsheets every day with school and things of that nature. I'm taking a couple finance classes. I wanted to learn how all these pieces to the puzzle kind of came together in the economy. So I ended up going into economics. Obviously, the entrepreneurship school was something I could apply economics to. I could learn how businesses worked, how they created value for their market with products or services, and how that contributed to kind of overall kind of GDP or regional GDP. So I kind of looked at it from a macro micro standpoint. There was obviously a lot of things going on in the Hampton Roads region. I ended up doing a study with an organization called HRMFA, which is Hampton Roads Military and Federal Facilities Alliance. They make sure all the military bases around here do not get taken out of the area and relocated to somewhere else, something they call BRAC, which is base realignment, where the folks in Washington, D.C. say, Norfolk Naval Base is not doing as productively of a mission as we set it out to do. We're going to rip that out and send it to another area that it may be better for. So I did an economic impact study, and basically it was, 70% of our or more of our economy was dependent on these bases being there, the families that it supported, the money they spent on local small businesses around the area. So it kind of opened my eyes to, and there was a lot of initiatives at the time. Zack at Hatch, you were doing some incredible things to kind of elevate that goal for the region. And you guys continue to beat that drum each day, Tim, as you guys go out into the world and make it a better place in the ecosystem. But as I kind of thought about, these different components of an economy and what made it productive, technology was a key piece of that. So as we started to develop these websites and apps from the company that I started out of the Sherm Entrepreneurial Center, we grew so fast from a people and infrastructure standpoint because we had databases everywhere for the different clients we had. We didn't really think about managing it. We were just so excited about helping businesses and developing cool things that people appreciated. And eventually that kind of bit us in the butt where we were not focused on actually protecting the infrastructure at the end of the day because we were distracted by the shiny objects, the new app we were going to develop or the new sales pitch we were going to go give to this next business. So we eventually ended up getting a cyber attack to one of our client databases. It kind of tarnished their reputation, obviously comes back on us. We didn't know how to react to it. I went to local companies that were in cybersecurity. They were working for the government mainly. They didn't really have the capability to help us as a small business kind of get over the obstacle that we were facing and kind of what I say, put the fire out. So that, at that time I was in my first minor league season. So I was obviously a little bit distracted. I was trying to find the resources to put that cyber attack out. We weren't able to keep that business open because of that reputational damage. More of the financial side, we had to spend a lot of money on trying to remediate what had happened. And we didn't really have a lot of free cash flow just to dump, thousands, hundreds of thousands into this instant response endeavor, as we call it today. But it set me on a light bulb moment that everybody is building something special in their own world, whether you're building it for somebody else or building it for yourself, to grow something that you see a gap in the economy. And it needs to be protected, or for somebody to be there as a, advisor, coach, somebody that you can look to and ask the right questions to. Hey, we're building all these great things. What should we think about when it comes to protecting it? I didn't see a lot of folks out there that were doing that. I went out, that was my first minor league season. I played 3 seasons, while I was kind of studying for some certifications and things. And once I got done with baseball, I went on kind of a rampage to learn everything I could about cybersecurity, what it meant to folks, how it impacted the economy, going back to my economics days, what the common business, that's small, medium, and growing kind of thinks about cybersecurity. A lot of times it was, we don't know much about it. So you have kind of the educational piece, or sometimes it's we've already been burned by it, or I know somebody that's been burned by it. So I want to take action and prioritize action to make sure I'm not just dumping money down a drain that's not actually having a protective impact on our business. So I worked for companies in DC, got to work with leaders that were coming out of the FBI, Homeland Security, these folks who have been 35 plus years in the government, making sure the government systems are protected. And, I pride myself on asking some of the right questions to these folks. A lot of times when I played baseball, the athlete didn't go to the coach a lot of times and ask them questions. The coach would have to come to them and try to give them continual advice. So I noticed early on, and it was probably my upbringing kind of in the military background, is, you respect the folks who are, leading you, but you have to be able to ask them questions on what they've learned up to the point to, leave you a little bit better off, kind of extract their wisdom from that standpoint. So that led me on a rampage, went to DC, traveled around the world, went to Wall Street and worked for a couple companies in the cybersecurity arena, ended up coming back here once remote work kind of became the norm. Wanted to be back in the area, bring some of the money and tax dollars that I was making back here, think about how I could contribute all the lessons I've learned, back to the world, the ecosystem that kind of helped me develop. And a few years later, Valor kind of came about based off of just really heavy success at the past company we were at. I met a lot of great folks who, said, hey, it might be a interesting thing to build a company that is a little bit different based off of what we've learned. And that's how Valor kind of came to be today. You kind of, I think you learn more from failure. I think we talked about that a little bit. Because I had that cyber attack, it made me be able to resonate with folks at the board level, leading these organizations, building these products and services, to say, I was once in a similar shoe that you're in. I was not focused on these activities. Here's some things to think about as you go forward to make sure you're not in the same position that I was once in, because, it's gut wrenching. It's not a good feeling to go through something like that. So I want to try to lead people a little bit better off so they don't have to experience that.
Are you from the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, grew up on the Little Creek base, moved off the base, went to Independence Middle, Shelton Park Elementary over there, Princess Anne High School.
So when you moved away, was it easy to come back? I mean, because a lot of people that move away, I feel like no matter where you live, right? So I grew up outside of DC. Tim grew outside of Buffalo. Like, I just don't see either of us ever moving back to those areas. I could be wrong, but I just don't see that happening. Was it because, I mean, you live in New York. It seems like it's the greatest place in the world, yada, yada, yada. But you come back here, like, is that an easy decision? What went into that decision? Like, yeah, you have a business that's mostly online. So does it matter where the business is? Because I mean, you hear about this from the economic development perspective. There's a lot of boomerangers. And even if you weren't, outside of the area for very long, you hit that category of someone who grew up here, moves out, comes back. Like, I just don't think there are a lot of boomerangers, yet it's a category that they talk about. Like, what made you come back? Was it easy? Stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of my friends are still gone. They haven't really decided to venture back. I think one of the forcing functions for me, a lot of people when I went to DC said, find a way to make, $100,000 and then, try to find a job back home. That was kind of the mentality, was get out of college, go to a big city, try to make a bunch of money, and then, go back to where you want to be. For me, it was, I went to one of my bosses at the time and said, I'd love to, go back home. In my mind, it was kind of the economic side going, if I'm making this money in DC, that's at a premium because it's cost of living there. And I take that back to an area like Hampton Roads, which is not as expensive as a DC to live. I'm going to be able to live a much better life from that standpoint. So that was one of the forcing functions, but it was, I've always been kind of one of the people that, wanted to continually support where my roots were. And if I could, do the same activity, not pay as much rent in a place like DC, and then, be able to be closer to my family, that was important to me. And then to be able to bring the lessons back to, the Strom Entrepreneurial Center that I learned in these big cities. They're doing a lot of things great, but, I've always tried to, going back to the example at ODU, where I went there for baseball because they would give me the opportunity to play in year one. It was kind of that same situation where I wanted to go back to a place that was growing and prospering, and kind of, learn the lessons from the big cities, but be able to bring them back and hopefully grow this area, not necessarily to that level, because I don't think we want to be a big city with all that traffic, for one thing. But I think that there's a lot of lessons learned that this area could benefit from. So I think that's one of the things. And, the family side's key. My dad was still in the military at the time, and, he wasn't going anywhere. This was kind of his last duty station. And I wanted to be back, closer to them, and, eventually build a family and things of that nature. I think it's a great area. The schools I went to were incredible. It set me up for, where I am today. And, if I could take somebody who was in my shoes at one time in this area and try to infuse some lessons in them when it's the right time for them to learn that lesson, that was always important to me, from a personal standpoint.
How's business going for you? And where do you do what is your what's your ideal client or customer, and where do most of those clients come from? Are they locally, or do you expand outside of the region?
Yeah, so just from a client profile standpoint, we serve technology, defense, and investment communities is what we call it, because we look at cybersecurity as a supply chain obstacle. So if, Tim, you and I are doing business, we use a similar system, and I have a bunch of security in place, but you have no protections in place. That leaves my organization open to potential cyber incidents, cyber attacks, things of that nature. So we look at it as kind of a supply chain or an ecosystem that everybody has to be up to speed in order to kind of protect that business ecosystem. So we kind of look at it as we serve those communities from that standpoint. I'd probably say 70% of them are outside the area. A lot of the folks around here are either in the defense space or highly regulated spaces. And I think that's one of the things that big cities offer for younger companies, at least on the service side of things where we sit, is there's a lot of companies in big cities that do cybersecurity, but they sell a software tool as a part of their offering. So we look at what we do, and we're probably one of the, one of 10 companies that still have this approach. I think a lot of companies in cybersecurity go out and say, we're going to be vendor agnostic. We're going to be the advisor that gives you an honest, unbiased opinion on what you should be doing to protect your business. And when you have a tool, most of the time that tool becomes your first recommendation. We just did a cybersecurity assessment on your business. Buy our tool and it'll solve all your, problems and your uncertainties. We've seen that not work time and time again. One of the jobs I had in DC was a cyber incident investigator. So every year I investigated about 100 companies that had a cyber attack, mostly through email. And I would sit with the boards of these companies and just kind of look at them and ask them some questions. And you just saw how detrimental and crippling it was to them, because they thought it'll never be me that is in that headline, in that news story, in that seat to have to make hard decisions on where we spend our money to put this fire out. PR, notifying all the people that were impacted, paying for credit monitoring. A lot of companies throw that in the mix. It's detrimental from a financial standpoint. And I saw it in my own business. I saw other businesses going through it. And we wanted to go out and make sure that people were protected on the front end. It's much lower cost when you do it up front than having to do it on the back end. So I took a lot of those lessons learned, and we use those today to kind of think about what those incidents looked like that we investigated, and try to make sure people can, either avoid or minimize the impact of those, when they do happen. They happen every day. A lot of times you don't see it in the news. And it's something that impacts a lot of businesses, but you're not going to go out to the world and say, hey, we were hit by a cyber attack. Like, this is our new marketing slogan. It's not a good reputational hit. So we commonly get, called on by the lawyers or the company that just got hit by the cyber attack, and it's very confidential, so it stays under the radar. But we see statistics. I think it's 70% of businesses in a recent study said that they're not prepared for a cyber incident. We try to reduce those statistics by getting creative with the services that we offer, things of that nature. Just recognizing this is relevant, and as AI and robots come into the equation and they start running a lot of the manufacturing operations, it just becomes more connected, and more holes and gaps get put into what we think about as kind of the ecosystem or the network.
What are maybe the top 3 things that a business could do to not eliminate, but prioritize cybersecurity in their business, so that they, with number 4 obviously being hire you, but what are some things that they can do to prepare for a cyber attack? Because I could think of a couple in the last year. Garmin had a big malware thing where they got taken off. I'm assuming that's a cyber attack, and a couple others that were big names that have had stuff that have happened. But what are some things that an up and coming business can do to prepare for that?
Yeah, I think the first question we always ask is, what do you depend on to run your business? A lot of times it's email, CRM systems. It could be an app or website they're developing. I think it just starts by understanding what's critical. And when we start thinking about, what's critical, making sure, there is protections in place across those critical, assets or systems. That could be strong passwords. We saw LastPass, which a lot of people, I think it was like 40% of businesses depended on LastPass across their organization to protect their passwords. And it was kind of a good sense of security. But we always recommend, password is just a configuration. So making sure you have the right rules in place to make sure the right people are doing the right things in the right system. So I think, we look at it as make sure you're preparing beforehand. So that's kind of the configuration side of things, where you can, go to your IT company and say, we want to make sure our email, nobody can email us from, Russia. We never do business in Russia, or we never do business in, Dubai. We don't need somebody to be emailing from Dubai to ask the CEO to send us $100 million. So just making sure you have some rule sets in place. I think that's a key one. And it's pretty simple when you get the right people in the room. We don't necessarily do that, but there's a lot of companies out there that will help you with the configuration side. Putting a plan in place if something does happen. It typically takes an organization only like 5 to 10 hours to just sit down and say, if something takes down our website or takes down our email, how are we going to make sure that the business continues? And that's, commonly referred to as business continuity, things of that nature. But making sure you just have a plan in place if something does go wrong, from that standpoint, I think is number 2. And then, I think number 3, it's kind of a toughie because it depends on how the business does business. So it could be, some businesses kind of stay away from technology. So, it could be lock your doors, make sure people don't leave, their phones in their car. So it's kind of the converged model that we operate on. We don't really sit all on the network side. We think about how to protect the business, and people and assets from a physical perspective are still very relevant in that equation. So a lot of times it's, make sure your, power generator has a backup. Make sure, the HR person's computer is backed up so that if somebody gets into it, you can get that data back and not have to pay a ransom for somebody who just says, we know your HR person's the only person that has a computer. They are the crown jewels for us to be able to take what your company is doing, even if it's, payroll processing, things of that nature. And we want to make sure that HR person's computer is protected and it's backed up so that if something does happen, we can get back what we lost. And then, from that standpoint, we kind of think about one size doesn't fit all in our world. So it really kind of starts with a collaborative conversation on what they depend on. But those are a few things every business could do from that standpoint to kind of just get the ball rolling. Our biggest thing is how do we help more businesses just take the first step, as opposed to making it extremely complex where it's, hey, here's 10 things you have to do. And they're just looking at it like cha-ching, cha-ching. They're just looking at dollar signs flowing out of their pocket to do something that they don't see business value in. But if we can say, take this first step, we'll show you the business value in it. And then we can take the second step. Then we can take the third step. It's a lot more digestible for a business person to understand. At the end of the day, they're the ones signing the checks. I don't know about you guys, but most of the time the technical folks are not the ones signing the checks and spending the money, and steering the strategy of the business.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that is amazing is the number of email addresses that are out there on company websites. And so like one of the things that I have done is I have a unique email address on our website. And anytime I get an email to that particular email address, I immediately know it's because they scraped it from the site itself. So I know that it's not a unique person like, oh, hey, I just met you. I'd like to get on a call and see how we can partner or something like that. But, so I just have one publicly facing email address. So like, as soon as I know that it comes in, it's just like bogus, delete, and I move on. What is that? Is that a Zack hack?
Good. I like that. What's the first word?
It's just it looks like it would be an email to me. So, but it's just not the right configuration of the email.
Web scraping is what they call it. Basically, that's the first step in any attacker competitor analysis. When they go out and say, I want to find a business that's weak, they just do kind of a massive web scrape, take these people, try to execute a couple of different angles on them. And, the people that are not protected, they're the ones that kind of get taken advantage of from that standpoint. So it's kind of interesting you mentioned that. Yeah.
So when an email comes in, you click the link and then you're screwed. I mean, that's basically.
And then your computer blows up.
Well, the thing that, so I'll take this opportunity to ask a professional question, but it will help out the people that are listening to this as well. Yeah. So you get a spam, what if you get some, obviously it's spam. I feel like if I click the unsubscribe, that's just verifying that it's a valid email address. Is it best of, am I just thinking that? Is that reality? Or is it just best to block that sender from to blacklist that email address?
Yeah, you can definitely blacklist it, but they'll find another email to email you from a lot of the times. So we look at kind of best practice when it comes to training folks is look at who the sender is. Make sure you click on the name because you'll see like Amazon support and then it'll be like,
are you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then it'll be like Amazon at, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like a number of characters. So it doesn't even look remotely legit. So that's the first step in recognizing the email. And then most of the time, I think it's 95% of the time, they're going to put a link in there. It may not be malicious, but they want to see if you click on it. It could be like a bit.ly link, and they can track if you click on it. And then the next email they send you, it's going to be even more appealing for you to click on the link. And then that's where they'll put, a virus or, some type of keylogger where they can actually see what you're typing now, or they try to get the data that's in your email box, for example, to try to see how you're sending payments and things of that nature. So it's kind of interesting.
Is this non-email as well? So just like the text messages and things like that? I mean, are we in that world at this point? I mean, just don't click anything from anyone that you don't know? Or are phones at this point, 2023 safe?
I think I get more text messages that are marketing related. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, God, I'm screwed.
You can't be too paranoid. We try not to make people too paranoid, but, fear monger, things of that nature. But there's some ways, that companies, you can educate people to just, copy the link, put it into a URL scanner, website or app. They have them all over the place. And it'll tell you, we have found this to be malicious. Don't click on it. So they'll tell you pretty rapidly if you just take that extra step. But a lot of times the headline looks awesome. The email name looks legit. I'm going to click on it. And then, in the background, something's running where, now they can listen to all your phone calls and take down all your text to learn more about you. A lot of times they just want to learn more about you so that they can find the important things that you're doing. You're logging into your bank account. You're spending $13.99 on Amazon. Let's each month make sure we're going to do an extra transaction for $13.99 that looks legit, but over time that money adds up. And these companies, these criminals are running huge organizations. They have call centers. They have folks who are dialing you all day and saying, hey, do you need a car warranty? and the older people, grandparents, things of that nature. I've had them, folks call me all the time. We present at the Rotary Club, and they get called all the time and they make them so paranoid. This is your bank.
Yeah.
We just saw a $100,000 wire come out. We need your, social and your bank account number in order to get in. We're actually going to send you a link for you to log in and verify. And you're logging in and giving them your bank account access. So now they have access to anything. They can send themselves money. And that's typically how it goes down. And you can't usually get that money back unless you act in a certain period of time. I think it's 24 hours. So you have to call the bank, the real bank, and say, you have to recognize it for one within 24 hours. Typically you don't recognize it for at least a day. And then you have to call your bank and say, I just got scammed. I need you to stop that payment immediately. The bank either says you're SOL or, we're able to get that money back for you. But they're still in your account. They know you're an easy target, and they're going to come back because they know that you're susceptible to doing what they want you to do. So
the prince in Africa has really, the prince in Africa has really become sophisticated. Yeah. And I would just like to take this moment to congratulate them on the maturity level that they have done at this point. They have really screwed over a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, that's it always happens to Granny, but it's oh man, just to hear it again, like people give them so much information, you're like, oh.
Speaking of which, Greg, do you have a TikTok account? What's your take on TikTok?
No TikTok account here. I've been our marketing department keeps saying we need to make TikTok videos because there's nobody talking about cybersecurity on there. But we could probably go down that rabbit hole on the where that data is going. You guys may have seen it out there. And
oh yeah,
if you're taking pictures everywhere you go, all of that, your background, all the things, what time you post. You say I'm going on this great vacation to the Bahamas on January 1st through January 10th, and then they search your name online. What's your address? It's a perfect time to go to your house and try to ransack it if they're in your area. So they, other countries and intelligence organizations in the countries that don't want to see us do well, they use all that information against us.
Well, and even the scarier thing for me is having access to your clipboard. So anytime you copy your password because you forget it, whatever you copied last on your iPhone, they have access to that. That's really scary stuff.
Yeah, you got to operate like you're always being watched, I guess you could say. But it's hard to do it when you're building a business that could be extremely unique. You're building an application that's nobody else does because you found a gap. And
because didn't they shut down Be Real?
I think so. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, that was like I don't know if you're familiar with that app, Zach, but it was like the #1 app on the App Store for a while. I think Apple ended up shutting it down, man, because there was several backdoors that were discovered, and so they had to pull it from the App Store and lock that thing down. But scary stuff.
This entire time, I just thought I had to worry about the wet and sticky bandits, and I guess there's a lot worse people out there than. Well,
and in that case, I mean, Be Real didn't have any. That to me, I would be willing to. I mean, it was just innocent stuff. Like, man, so to that point, you're building an app. You need to make sure that stuff is locked down from day one, because I talk about a PR nightmare. My goodness.
Yeah, we actually talked back to the ODU connection. Is we actually talked to one of their professors. We do a Friday live stream, and we talked to a professor over there that's in sociology, and he studies a lot of physical crime, and it's much easier for people to commit a crime when they can't see the person. And he basically proved it mentally. when you look at a person, say you're walking up to somebody and you're like, I'm going to go tackle this person and, beat them up, or, try to steal this lady's purse. As humans, we kind of get we second guess doing it. But when it comes to the cyber standpoint, it's like, you don't even see the person. All you see is numbers and, data. So it's becoming a threat vector, a mode of attack that is easier for people to commit, which is scary when somebody actually wants to do wrong by somebody else. So at the end of the day, we try to, educate folks. It all starts with education and inform them on what we're seeing in the environment. And, they decide to either take action or not take action. I think that's something we all decide when we put our feet on the ground in the morning. Where do we dedicate our time? And, we try to give them the information they need to be able to take informed action and kind of make the complexities of it, try to eliminate them as much as possible, because, business is already sophisticated, and, I don't know, what business the listener may be in, but what they're doing is something unique, and, you found a gap, and, maybe spend a little bit of time on thinking about protecting it and putting some small things in place. And a lot of times the criminal organizations look for what we call the low hanging fruit, which is just the person who hasn't even thought about it, and they try to take advantage of that person. So if you have just a little bit in place, they're going to bump into a wall and they're going to be redirected to the next person. So they're not going to you're not going to have that negative impact take place. So we always try to elevate the person to that next level. They'll be kind of walked around, if that makes sense. If you're the big guy walking down the street, and you're with somebody with a purse, a lot of times they may avoid you, but they'll go to that next person who's walking by themselves and they'll take advantage of them. So we try to make sure they're guarded from that standpoint.
What's something we haven't talked about today that you want to talk about?
No, I think we're all mental athletes at the end of the day. I think that's something that fascinates me in business. We talked a little bit about Goggins. I think he's a representation of that. I think you guys have a unique view into all the great things going on in the Hampton Roads region. Maybe a little bit on that, kind of what you guys are looking forward to in 2023 when it comes to how we continually develop, as an area, as an organization, as a community, as folks who want to see this area do well. Kind of some of the things you guys are looking forward to, going into this year. I'd be interested in diving down that avenue.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is all about continuous improvement, and that's not only for self, for business, but as a region. The drum that I continue to beat is just trying to paint the picture in the sense of, if we all focus on growing the pie, then everyone's individual slice is going to naturally become bigger. And so let's stop trying to take away from someone else's slice of the pie. If we all focus on making that pie bigger, then we all win. So that's really one of the big things that we just got to continue to try to. I mean, it's kind of like baseball. I mean, 4 singles is still a run, and then you got the bases loaded still. So it doesn't. We don't have to try to steal all the home runs and everything. That's just base hits, and eventually it's all going to add up. So that's really what I'm focused on.
And to piggyback off of that, there's more than day one and the last day of a business, right? So don't think about, I just started, I'm out of business for whatever reason, positive or negative. Tell that story a lot. And I think those are where the real stories are. And that's where the things in a business are not celebrated. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. So to continue to see those stories being presented, whether they're in story form or not, I think is critical. And I think most people talk about, I started my business. I closed my business. I sold my business. Well, tell me the story in between. There's a lot of good stuff there. So
yeah, I think we all relate and connect to stories. I think you guys are both incredible storytellers. What do you think is the best medium for those stories to be communicated to folks, I guess, early on? I mean, I guess it's the start
wherever those people want to consume it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the answer, right? I mean, wherever your audience wants to be, right? If you would have told me that the whole DVD thing in Netflix was going to become this huge thing, and that it would turn into people watching movies out of their house instead of going to the movie theater, I think people would have told you you're stupid. You do it where people are willing to be the audience.
Yeah, I'm always amazed. I'm always telling people, hey, any press releases, any news, anything to celebrate, no matter how big or small, let's celebrate. Use StartWheel as a platform, and let's celebrate that. I'm always amazed at piece that like either StartWheel's not big enough, that they want to wait for the pilot media to put that, they wanted to push it there first. And it's just like, I mean, we're touching tens of thousands of people every single month. And this is a curated audience. These are people that are going to support you. These are people that are investors, that are going to be potential customers, people that are going to be potential mentors, partners, whatever the case is. And so like so I appreciate you coming on this show, because some people are just like, they're still in the startup phase, but they're too big for StartWheel. It's like, hey man, we're the champions for you from the very beginning, and leverage what you have. And so that's if you want to get under my skin, it's like, oh well, don't push this press release out until pilot media sends it out first. It's like, okay. Or someone asked me to share something on StartWheel, and then I'll see that they share it on social media later, but they don't share it on the StartWheel. They don't. I'm good enough to help them promote what they have, but they won't throw me a bone. It's like, hey man, if you're going to promote what you're doing, throw some web traffic our way. But no, they're gonna promote the people that don't care about them. They're just putting it out there. So it's just all about.
Well, traditional media is exactly what I just said.
Yeah.
Day one, last day media, right? Or something really bad, right? Not something in between, telling that story. And
we were so dedicated to the success of startups in this area. I mean, I generally, unless you catch me out of the office, you push something, you want us to share something, help celebrate you. We, between Andrew and I, we have that posted, and that's out in the world within a few minutes. I mean, that's what we're there for. And yeah, man, I just want people to continue to leverage what we have, and I'm not going to stop. Going back full circle, we started talking about it. I do this every day, just like from an athletic workout standpoint. It's like, I will outlast you, I will outwork you, and you'll give up before I do, man. Guaranteed.
Love it. Yeah, we need more. We need more of that.
Kick them down. Kick them while they're down. Yeah. Oh.
I think we're all starting, each day when we wake up, right, with what we've done in the past and what we're looking forward to in the future, and the wheel never stops, right? You never get too big to kind of take a step back and restart mentally to make yourself better off to be able to survive what you're going to encounter in the future. So
yeah,
love it.
Absolutely.
Love the wheel concept. Yeah.
Greg, appreciate your time. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me.